Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated to a medieval Pokémon world. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 71, Raising Shuckle. Planning the internal territorial layout of a city, determining land use ratios, functional zones, and a coherent road system, was a daunting task even in Lucien's time. Though this world still resembled the medieval age, the existence of his cheat meant Lucien could think further ahead than anyone else. Beyond residential districts, he envisioned dedicated commercial zones, schools, farmland, orchards, and wide pastures. He also factored in the construction of underground sewers, future industrial workshops, and a system of irrigation channels and waterworks. Most importantly, he planned to include areas designed specifically for Pokémon habitation, because his goal was a city where humans and Pokémon could truly coexist. It would be a long and intricate project. Lucien spent the entire afternoon discussing his ideas with Elena. When she first heard him say a city where humans and monsters coexist, Elena froze in astonishment. "Your Highness, are you truly planning to build a city where humans and monsters live together?" she asked in disbelief. Lucien raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem?" Elena quickly shook her head. "No, I'm just amazed by such a bold vision." Over the past few days, she had gradually shed her old fear of monsters. But even so, this idea, this dream, seemed far ahead of its time. Still, what a magnificent dream it was. Her eyes sparkled. If such a city were built, it would overturn the very foundation of the world. Lucien smiled faintly, as if reading her thoughts. "Yes," he said softly. "I want to shatter the old beliefs. Humans and monsters are not enemies. They are companions, partners. Together, we can build something greater." He leaned back slightly, his voice calm but resolute. "Grass-type monsters can help cultivate fields and speed up crop growth, multiplying harvests. Fire-types can refine ores, their flames purifying what forges cannot. With their help, we can advance faster than any kingdom in history. You've seen the results yourself." Elena closed her eyes, envisioning it, a thriving town where monsters wandered freely among people, helping with work, harvest, and trade. "Your Highness," she murmured, her cheeks slightly flushed, "do you think I'll ever have a beautiful, elegant monster of my own? Like your Dratini, or Anna's Zoroa?" Lucien chuckled. "That depends on fate," he said. "Perhaps tomorrow you'll meet one meant for you." "I'll be looking forward to that day," Elena said earnestly. Then, after a moment's thought, she straightened and declared, "Your Highness, let me help you. I want to build this city with you." As an architect who pursued art and innovation, she couldn't possibly let such a revolutionary project slip away. Watching Elena leave, Lucien exhaled quietly. The old butler, Elif, stepped forward with a cup of tea. "Your Highness, please rest for a while," he said kindly. Lucien accepted it and took a sip. The warmth spread through his fingers. "Elif," he said after a pause, "have you ever heard of a place called Lacunosa?" "Lacunosa?" Elif frowned, thinking carefully before shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Your Highness. I don't believe I've ever heard that name." As Lucien expected. He gave a small nod. According to his memories, Lacunosa town was a border settlement on the northeastern edge of Unova, but in this era, it was likely just a nameless village. Since most of their people had come from Aindok, deep in the kingdom's heartland, it was only natural they wouldn't know such a remote place existed. He would have to wait for another opportunity to confirm its location. 3 days later, Ryan, who had set out on his mission, returned to the territory. He strode into the Lord's Hall with a wide grin, a large sack slung over his shoulder. "Your Highness, I've brought back the monsters you requested." Ryan swung the large bundle off his shoulder and dropped it onto the table with a dull thud. With a clattering sound, several small turtle-like Pokémon rolled out of the sack, their crimson shells riddled with holes, their limbs quickly retracting inside. It was Shuckle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 in total? That many? Lucian blinked in surprise, staring at the Shuckle that had tucked their heads deep into their shells, trembling slightly. Ryan scratched the back of his head awkwardly. They're really easy to find, Your Highness. These little guys like to hide under rocks. Just flip one over and, well, there's usually a Shuckle underneath. They don't even try to run, they just pull in their heads and freeze. Lucian sighed softly. Poor things. He carefully picked up the Shuckle one by one, placing them in 2 neat rows across the table. Then he cleared his throat and spoke gently. Hello, Shuckle. None of them moved. First, I owe you an apology for Ryan's overly enthusiastic approach, Lucian continued with a small smile. We didn't bring you here to harm you. We'd like to invite you to stay in our territory, to live with us. Still, the Shuckle remained motionless. Lucian leaned forward slightly, his tone patient and kind. If you choose to stay, we'll make sure you have food in safety. You won't have to hide under rocks anymore, and you won't have to fear other monsters. He then glanced toward Snivy and Dratini, who were standing nearby. His eyes wordlessly conveyed what he wanted. Snivy folded her arms and sighed but nodded, while Dratini immediately brightened and slithered forward with enthusiasm. Woo! Dratini chirped cheerfully, trying to talk to them. Snivy eventually joined in, speaking curtly but helpfully. The Pokémon began to chatter back and forth, and even though Lucian and Ryan couldn't understand the words, they could sense the meaning, reassurance, friendliness, and safety. Ryan, watching in awe, whispered, Your Highness, can monsters from different species actually understand each other? Lucian smiled. Apparently so. Isn't it fascinating? He had originally thought about letting the Minccino group handle this introduction, since they were gentle and social, but the opportunity had come suddenly. After a few more rounds of Dratini's soft encouragements and Snivy's firm reassurances, the Shuckle finally began to stir. Cautiously, one by one, they peeked out of their shells, small eyes blinking nervously as they took in their surroundings. When their gazes finally met Lucian's, he reached into a nearby box and set down a handful of citrus berries on the table. To express my apology, Lucian said warmly, These berries are for you. Please, eat as much as you like. The Shuckle froze, glancing between the berries and the human who offered them. Shuckle, one of them murmured softly, as if asking if it was really okay. Dratini bobbed her head eagerly. Woo! Encouraged by her tone, the Shuckle hesitated only a moment longer before beginning to move again. They extended their soft, pale tentacles, delicately grasped the citrus berries, and slowly pulled them through the holes in their shells, tucking them inside to eat later, safe and hidden. That was Shuckle's special habit, storing fruit within their shells, letting it ferment slowly with time until it became a delicious, energy-restoring juice. Chapter 72, Victini. Think about it, Shuckle, Lucian said patiently. We sincerely invite you to join this territory, but you don't have to decide right away. You can stay here first, experience life for yourself, and then make your choice. Shoo! Shuckle! The group of Shuckle hesitated. Earlier that day, they had been hiding quietly under a large stone, waiting for nightfall. When the stronger Pokémon were asleep, they planned to sneak out and search for fruit. Unexpectedly, they had been captured by this human instead. Yet, the two Pokémon, Dratini and Snivy, had told them something they could hardly believe. If they stayed, the humans here would feed them every day. Not only that, they would be protected, able to live freely and without fear. The Shuckle were tempted. But, could that really be true? As some of the weakest Pokémon in the forest, they had always lived in hiding, avoiding danger. They had never known kindness from humans, only fear. Could something so good truly happen to them? They didn't know. But the offer was too tempting to ignore. After a long silence, the group of Shuckle finally nodded, their soft voices rising one after another. Shoo! Shuckle! Lucian smiled warmly. I'm glad. Ryan, until the ranch is finished, they'll be in your care. He paused, thinking. Perhaps they could stay in the orchard for now. Lucian pictured the wooden hives that beekeepers used. They could build something similar, small wooden homes along the orchard's edge, where the shuckle could live safely. There, they could eat fruit from the trees whenever they were hungry, and humans could simply collect their fermented berry juice at regular intervals. It would be efficient and harmonious. I'll take good care of them, Your Highness. Ryan promised. Lucian smiled softly. The boy had been overworked lately, every person in the territory had. For a moment, Lucian wished he could split one person into two. But that was impossible. You've done well, Ryan, Lucian said gently. Take some time to rest. I'm sure your Simsir has missed you. Yes. Ryan's face brightened instantly. Just the thought of his monster waiting at home filled him with anticipation. Then go, Lucian said with a laugh. Ryan saluted cheerfully, gathered the shuckle in his arms, and hurried off toward home. Before he even reached his door, he could already see the familiar figures waiting for him, his family. Grinning from ear to ear, he raised a hand and shouted, I'm back. There was no better feeling than coming home to those who were waiting for you. Meanwhile, far away, on the terrace of Earthsword Castle in Aendok, the old king stood beside Victini, gazing down at the bustling streets below. Despite the lively scene, his expression was clouded with sorrow. Beneath the kingdom's surface prosperity, turmoil was brewing. How long could this fragile peace truly last? Ah! The king sighed, his voice weary. The kingdom stood on the edge of division. Barons and viscounts throughout the land had already begun to take sides, pledging loyalty to one of his two ambitious sons. If war came, Aendok would be split in two, the north and south torn apart, with the capital itself as the dividing line. Victini! The old king whispered, his gaze lifting toward the gray sky. In his youth, he had built this realm with his own hands, founded the kingdom of Aendok, ensuring his people could live in peace. Yet now, in his twilight years, all that peace was unraveling. Nini! Victini's small voice trembled with sadness, mirroring his king's despair. I wonder how Lucian is faring. The king murmured softly. His only concern was his youngest son. Almost 6 months had passed since Lucian had departed for his fief. Was his child safe? Why hadn't he received any word yet? What troubled the old king most was this: if war truly broke out, Lucian's fledgling territory would be the first to suffer. What could he possibly do then? His two elder sons had gone mad in their lust for the throne. To them, anyone who stood in their way, blood or not, was an enemy. What did family mean when the crown was at stake? At that moment, the old king bitterly regretted sending his youngest son so far away, safe from the capital, yes, but now completely out of reach. Just then, a sharp cry pierced the air above the terrace. The king lifted his head. A carrier pidobe swooped down from the sky, gliding toward the balcony where he stood with Victini. It landed lightly upon the stone railing, tilting its head curiously as its small claws clicked against the marble. The king blinked, startled, until he saw the rolled parchment tied to the pidobe's leg. A letter. His trembling fingers untied the string, unrolling the parchment. When his eyes caught the familiar handwriting, his breath hitched. This was from Lucian. Victini fluttered closer, peering at the parchment in curiosity, but unable to read. Nini, it chirped softly. It's from Lucian, the old king said, voice trembling with both joy and disbelief. He began to read. The letter recounted Lucian's journey from the royal city, his struggles through the snowstorm, the losses suffered on the road, and the desperate fight for survival in a frozen wilderness. The king's hand tightened around the parchment, his heart aching with each line. But then came words that eased his worry: how Lucian had found a valley, built homes from timber, tamed wild monsters, and established a new life for his people. By the time he reached the end, the king's eyes were wet with tears. Unknowingly, his youngest son, once a frail boy, had become a true leader. Nini? Victini hovered anxiously, flying circles around the king's shoulders. It wanted to know what the letter said. The old king smiled faintly, and with a voice trembling with pride, he read the contents aloud for Victini. That child has grown up. He let out a long, shaky breath. Relief mixed with melancholy in his tone. Still, the worry in his heart did not fade. Lucien had grown up surrounded by luxury, fed, clothed, and sheltered in the finest palace the kingdom could offer. Now, in the wilderness, was he eating well? Was he warm enough? Were there dangerous monsters nearby? The old king stared out into the distance, the clouds gathering beyond the horizon. Victini, he said quietly, Lucien needs our help. He closed his eyes, mind racing through what little he could still give, manpower. Tools. Seeds. Supplies. Magical beasts. When he opened his eyes again, they were clear with resolve. Pidove, he said to the bird Pokémon standing nearby, I must ask you to remain in the capital for now. We need your guidance. Then, he turned to Victini, his voice gentler now, tinged with both sorrow and hope. Victini, he said softly, this is my final command to you. Go. Protect Lucien for me. Victini's eyes widened, glowing faintly with blue fire. Nini. It fluttered closer, tugging at the king's robe, its expression full of worry and protest. But the old man only smiled, resting a wrinkled hand on Victini's small head. Don't worry, he murmured. I'll be fine, at least until the war ends. They are my children, after all. He looked once more at the letter, his son's handwriting illuminated by the setting sun. Go, Victini. Lucien needs you more than I do. Chapter 73, Joy Sisters. In the prison beneath the castle, within the heart of Aindok, the air was heavy with dampness and silence. An armored guard descended the stone steps, his boots echoing against the walls. He approached a rusted iron door, withdrew a metal key, and turned it with a sharp click. Hey, you two, come out, he barked. In the dim corner of the cell, two young girls, perhaps 17 or 18, huddled together beneath their black hoods. At the sound of his voice, they stirred. Sister, whispered the younger one, clutching the other's hand tightly. The older girl squeezed back, her tone calm despite the fear in her eyes. Excuse me, sir, what's happening? She asked quietly. The guard hesitated, glancing at them. In the flickering torchlight, their faces became visible, identical in every way. Their height, features, and even their voices were the same, like reflections of each other. It was this unnatural resemblance that had branded them as cursed twins. Rumor claimed that any child born from a union with them would share their faces, an omen of calamity. Those who drew near them invited misfortune upon themselves. The guard quickly looked away, unwilling to meet their eyes. By decree of His Majesty, he said gruffly, you two are to be sent to the fiefdom of His Highness Lucien. Lucien? The sisters exchanged a startled glance. Then, without protest, they rose to their feet and followed the guard out of the cell. Through a narrow, hidden corridor they walked, until finally, light spilled in through the end of the passage. Before them stretched a dense forest outside the royal city, mist curling between the trees. There, hundreds of people had already gathered. Rows of carriages and supply wagons stood ready, drawn by beasts of burden under tight restraint. Thick tarps covered the cargo, whatever they carried was hidden from view. Sister, the younger twin murmured, voice trembling. Don't be afraid, Lena, said the older sister softly. She pulled the hood further over her sibling's head, shadowing her delicate features. Keep your head down. Don't draw attention. Her name was Selena Joy, and her younger sister was Lena Joy. The caravan numbered nearly 800 souls, and when the restrained monsters were counted, almost 1,000 beings in total. In such a vast convoy, the two sisters' presence was nothing but a drop in the tide. Move out! Came the shout, and with the creak of wheels and the heavy thud of hooves, the line began to move. His Highness Lucien. Lena whispered the name quietly to herself. Though fear lingered in her heart, she kept her expression calm for her sister's sake. They had been born in a remote border village. Their mother had loved a young villager, but tragedy struck, she died giving birth to them. At first, the villagers pitied the twins. But as they grew and their identical faces mirrored their mother's perfectly, fear replaced pity. They were called omen-born witches, children of the curse. And so, the villagers drove them away. They wandered for weeks before reaching the royal city, hungry, penniless, and desperate. One night, to feed her starving sister, Selena stole a few loaves of bread from a baker's stall. They were caught before they could even eat. And imprisoned. Now, without understanding why, they were being taken away once again, toward the unknown. The caravan advanced through the shadowed forest, its wagons rumbling across the damp earth. So many people gathered here, their fates now bound together, walking toward a future shrouded in fog. High above, on the balcony of the castle, the old king stood silently, watching the long, dark line moving beneath the trees. His face was solemn, his eyes weary. This was the last thing he could do for his youngest son. Perhaps, it was also the last time he and Victini would ever stand together beneath the same sky. Alas! The old king let out a weary sigh. He watched until the caravan dwindled into a mere shadow at the horizon, vanishing beneath the forest canopy. Only when the last glimmer of sunlight faded did he turn away his aged back, once proud and straight, now bent beneath the weight of years and regret, slowly disappeared into the dim corridors of the castle. It was another bright spring morning, with a gentle breeze blowing across the plains. Lucien sat within the Lord's Hall, listening to a leaf report on the latest progress within the territory. Your Highness Lucien, the mill you requested has been completed. Once the wheat ripens, everyone will be able to grind flour themselves. Elif's tone was full of anticipation. For a man who had lived his whole life in the royal city, watching crops grow and turn into food with his own hands was an entirely new experience. Lucien smiled faintly. Good work. I'm glad to hear it. It was already April. Thanks to the careful tending of grass-type Pokémon such as Snivy and Snover, the wheat, normally not ripe until May, had already turned a pale gold, heavy with grain. In just a few days, it would be ready for harvest. The new mill used a water wheel to harness the river's flow, its turning gears driving the millstones to grind wheat into fine flour. How's Elena doing? Lucien asked. Lady Elena has completed the preliminary layout for the new town, Elif replied, handing over a thick roll of parchment. She asked me to deliver these blueprints to you. Construction can begin whenever you approve. Lucien unrolled the plans and studied them. The map depicted wide, curved streets, a central square, and designated zones for markets, housing, workshops, and even a section marked Pokémon dwellings. He nodded. Good. Let's build according to this layout. The primary materials, stone, timber, brick, and mortar, were already being produced in large quantities. The supplies would be enough to build a modest but proper town, one that could shelter both people and Pokémon alike. Yes, Your Highness. Elif bowed and hurried off to begin the preparations. Lucien leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Out of habit, he opened his territory panel, scanning the latest numbers. To his surprise, the satisfaction level had climbed past 500. A subtle pulse of light flashed across the panel. Advanced herbalism unlocked. A flood of new knowledge surged into Lucien's mind, formulas, ingredient lists, brewing methods. Good potion, great potion, silver spray, gold spray. Compared to the earlier basic remedies, these new ones were far more potent. Good and great potions offered stronger healing properties. Silver and gold sprays released a special fragrance that repelled wild Pokémon more effectively. Lucien's eyes brightened when he noticed one particular recipe. Ingredient required, lily root leaf. He smiled. Lila's lily roots will be useful again. He quickly wrote down the formulas with his quill, intending to give them to Lila later that day. Once that was done, Lucien turned his thoughts to the other affairs of the territory. The Doug trio had grown surprisingly fond of their new life, happily tilling soil alongside the farmers. They seemed content, digging rich furrows in exchange for food and companionship. Simzir was continuing her brickmaking, though the process was still primitive. Once the miners unearthed coal veins, Lucien planned to construct a proper kiln, one that could mass-produce bricks and tiles for the expanding settlement. Unfortunately, the underground still teemed with dangerous Pokémon. Even with Anna and Zoroa guarding them, the miners only dared to work near the surface. The deeper tunnels remained untouched, territory of unknown monsters. Lucien sighed softly. So many Pokémon in the territory, yet so few that can actually fight. He leaned forward, tapping his quill thoughtfully against the map. I wonder how things are going at Shuckles. Chapter 74, Reunion. On their first day in the territory, the Shuckle huddled together inside Ryan's cabin, too frightened to move. Only on the next day, after much gentle persuasion from Ryan, did they finally muster the courage to peek outside. Through cracks in the wooden doors and windows, they cautiously observed the world beyond. They saw how Ryan cared for his Pokémon, how he always brought back fresh fruit when returning from the fields. Whenever that happened, Simzir and the fungus would dart forward in excitement, chattering happily. At mealtime, the Shuckle watched Ryan and the others gather around the table. Pokémon and humans sat together, sharing freshly cooked food and laughter. Then came bedtime. Ryan squeezed into the narrow bed with the Pokémon curled around him, everyone nestled close in a pile of warmth and quiet breathing. It was a scene the timid Shuckle had never witnessed before. The next morning, curiosity got the better of them. Led by Ryan, the Shuckle finally ventured outdoors to explore the settlement. They saw Snover playing with human children, Magikarp splashing happily in the pond, Dugtrio busily tilling the fields alongside farmers, and Petalo basking lazily in the sunlit herb garden. Everywhere they looked, Pokémon and humans lived together in harmony. Here, no one was hunted. No one went hungry. Everyone smiled. Shoo! The Shuckle blinked in disbelief. Could this place truly be so peaceful? The longer they watched, the warmer their hearts grew. By the end of the day, the decision came naturally. They wanted to stay. When Ryan relayed the news, Lucien was delighted. That very morning, he designed a special home for them, a large, wooden hive-like shelter built in the orchard. The structure had 4 tiers, each hollow chamber carefully sized for a single Shuckle. Though modest, the sturdy wooden nest made them feel safe, something they had never experienced in the wild. As the Shuckle one by one crawled into their new compartments, Lucien smiled and asked, "Well then, how do you like it here?" Shuckle! 8 tiny red heads popped out of the hive in unison, their eyes gleaming with joy. Lucien chuckled. Good. Because by August, these fruit trees will be heavy with berries, and you can eat as much as you like. The Shuckle's eyes lit up at the thought of endless fruit. But, Lucien continued with a playful tone, I'd like to ask a little favor in return. Shoo? He smiled. I've heard that the sap you produce is delicious and even restores a Pokémon's strength. Would you help us make some? We'll bring you all the berries you need. The Shuckle understood immediately. Brewing sap was second nature to them, they only needed to stuff berries into their shells, and as they rested, the juices would ferment into thick, healing syrup. The group nodded eagerly. Shoo! Okay, deal. Lucien said with a smile. In exchange, we'll ensure your safety and provide you with plenty of food. The Shuckle looked at one another, and their eyes lit up. Shoo! To them, it felt like they'd struck gold. Food and safety in exchange for a little sap? It was the best bargain they'd ever heard. Still, a few of them tilted their heads in confusion. Shoo! Wouldn't the humans be at a disadvantage in this trade? But then, one Shuckle suddenly chirped as an idea struck. Shoo! Shoo! If Lucien needed their sap, then all they had to do was work harder and make more of it. The others quickly agreed, their shells bobbing in unison. Lucien didn't understand their chatter, but their cheerful tone made the meaning clear enough. Then it's settled, Lucien said warmly. Shoo! That night, thanks to the Shuckle's efforts, Lucien, Dratini, and Snivy shared the first batch of freshly brewed berry sap. Lucien took a sip and blinked in surprise. It was thick and sweet, with a hint of tartness, somewhere between yogurt and honey. That's good, Lucien murmured, swirling it in his cup. A little sour, a little sweet, this could even become a trade specialty one day. He smiled at the thought. Maybe it can be sold as a specialty to other towns in the future, Lucien thought. All right, Elif, Lucien said after a while, setting the cup down. It's late. You should get some rest. Yes, Your Highness Lucien. Please rest well, Elif said, bowing. Just as Elif turned to leave, a sudden uproar erupted outside. Screams. Shouts. Cries of joy. Lucien froze mid-step. What's happening? Elif shook his head, equally startled. Without hesitation, Lucien rose and strode out of the Lord's Hall. Elif hurried after him. They followed the noise to the open square. A massive crowd had gathered, their torches casting golden light across the faces of hundreds of men and women. Lucien blinked in disbelief. So many people. Then Elif's eyes widened, his voice trembling with excitement. Your Highness Lucien! Look, it's Sir Geralt! Lucien turned, and his breath caught. A tall, silver-haired man strode toward him through the crowd, his armor battered yet gleaming in the firelight. Behind him lumbered a towering Pokémon, an Haxorus, its axe-shaped tusks catching the torchlight like molten gold. Lucien's heart skipped a beat. The man approached, dropped to one knee, and lowered his head. Your Highness! Lucien stared at him for a heartbeat before whispering, Geralt. The name stirred a flood of memories, his most trusted knight, the leader of the Twin Dragon Order. A man once believed lost to the snowstorm. Lucien's eyes widened, then softened with relief. You survived. Geralt bowed his head slightly. After we separated, I fought the beasts until they finally let me go. I searched for you for months, and along the way, I found those who were lost. He paused, voice steady despite the weight of his words. I led them to a nearby village, where Ivan found us not long ago. Lucien exhaled, relief flooding through him. I'm glad you're alive. As he looked past Geralt, he saw them, dozens upon dozens of familiar faces. Men, women, children, all once thought lost to the blizzard. A warm notification blinked before Lucien's eyes. Population, 299 citizens. Tears and laughter filled the air as families reunited, embracing one another after months apart. Lucien smiled quietly. Welcome home. Then, turning to Geralt, he reached out and helped him to his feet. Get up. His gaze fell on the Haxorus beside him, its massive tusks gleaming faintly in the moonlight. And that beast? Lucien asked. Geralt placed a hand on the creature's flank. I fought it during my journey. In the end, it yielded, and has followed me ever since. Lucien blinked in astonishment. He'd known Geralt was strong, but to defeat a Haxorus and earn its loyalty? That was beyond imagination. Still, this wasn't the time for questions. Lucien turned back to the crowd, his voice rising above the chatter. Elif! Prepare food for everyone, we're celebrating tonight. Yes, Your Highness. Elif said, his eyes shining. Chapter 75, Bonfire Party. Night fell gently over the valley. Above, a sea of stars shimmered in the deep blue sky, so clear it felt close enough to touch. In the center of the settlement, the people gathered around a roaring bonfire, their faces glowing orange in the flickering light. Laughter and chatter filled the air, washing away the fear and exhaustion of months past. Hey, everyone, come help! These are the fish caught by Lord Lucien's monster. A young man arrived, carrying a basket full of freshly caught, glistening fish. Those nearby immediately rose to help, cleaning the catch, skewering them neatly, brushing them with oil and salt before placing them over the crackling flames. Soon, the air filled with the irresistible aroma of roasted fish, smoky and savory. Wow, smells amazing! I can't wait to eat! Several children clapped their hands in excitement, their eyes fixed on the golden fish roasting above the fire. Adults smiled and began to share stories of hardships faced, of narrow escapes, of miracles that had brought them back together again. For the monsters living in the settlement, this was their first bonfire. They darted around the clearing, chasing one another playfully. Snivy and Dratini coiled and danced through the air as embers sparkled like fireflies. Simsir and Minchino drummed tiny rhythms on wooden bowls, while Shuckle peeked shyly from their hive boxes, humming softly. It was a rare sight, humans and Pokémon laughing together under the same sky. Lucian stood at a distance, arms folded, watching the scene unfold beside Gerald. For a long while, neither spoke. The warmth of the fire reflected in their eyes. Even someone as composed as Lucian couldn't hide the astonishment in his heart. 78 people had become nearly 300 in a single night. With so many hands, his plans could finally take shape. Roads, farms, mills, workshops, everything could finally move forward. Beside him, Gerald watched the Pokémon weaving among the people, his brow furrowed in curiosity. "Your Highness," he said, "these beasts, what are they?" Lucian smiled faintly. "They're not beasts anymore, Gerald. They're part of our territory now." Gerald blinked, then gave a slow, understanding nod. "You're harnessing their power." "Exactly," Lucian replied. "Each one has a different gift. Used wisely, they can bring great prosperity to us." He turned his gaze toward the towering dragon standing behind Gerald, the Haxorus, scales gleaming like black steel. "And that one beside you, it'll fight with you, won't it?" "Always," Gerald said with quiet pride. "Since the day I subdued it, it's never left my side." Lucian's lips curved upward. "Haxorus." Gerald was slightly startled. "Its name," Lucian said with a smile. Gerald looked at the beast beside him, muttering under his breath, "Hororus." Just then, Ryan came running from across the square, his face glowing with excitement. "Sir Gerald. You're alive." Gerald's stern expression softened. He'd already heard from Lucian how this young man had helped hold the territory together in his absence. "You've done well, Ryan," he said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Ryan scratched the back of his neck with a grin. "It's what anyone would have done." Elif approached then, bowing slightly. "Your Highness, everyone's been settled in for the night. We didn't have enough cabins, so some are staying in tents for now." "That's fine," Lucian said, nodding. "Let them rest and enjoy the evening. We'll discuss rebuilding plans tomorrow." "Understood, Your Highness." Lucian gave a final glance at the joyous crowd. Dratini had curled up sleepily around Snivy's tail, both half dozing by the fire. Smiling faintly, he patted Dratini's head and turned away. "Let's go, you two. Time to rest." As he left, Elif turned to Gerald. "You should rest as well, Sir Gerald. You've traveled far." "I will," Gerald said, though he didn't move. Once Lucian was gone, Gerald instead sat by the fire beside Ryan. "Tell me," he asked quietly, "how did all this begin?" Ryan stared into the flames for a long moment, then exhaled softly. "At first, we thought we were doomed," he said. "No shelter, no food. Nothing. We were just a handful of survivors." He looked up, eyes glimmering. "But then His Highness led us to this place. Not only that, he helped us build houses, gather berries, and fish. Thanks to His Highness, we were able to survive this winter safely, and everyone is still alive. Not only that, His Highness Lucian also found many magical beasts and brought them into the territory to help us," Ryan said with pride. "A Simsir, Shuckle, Dugtrio, Snover from the snowy plains." Ryan's eyes gleamed as he spoke of them, his voice brimming with admiration. Gerald listened quietly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling a deep surge of emotion. His Highness had truly grown up. The bonfire flickered through the night, casting dancing shadows over humans and Pokémon as they celebrated together. That night marked the beginning of something remarkable. In the early days of April, year 149 of the royal calendar, humans and Pokémon began their first true coexistence here. The next morning, Lucian rose early. While the Minchinos were still curled up fast asleep, he brought Dratny and Snivy to the large tent that served as their temporary meeting hall. Inside, Elif, Gerald, Ryan, Anna, and Ivan were already waiting. When Lucian entered, Elif stepped forward and began his report. "Your Highness Lucian, I've completed a head count." Lord Gerald brought back a total of 221 civilians. Lucian nodded thoughtfully. "How are they reacting to the monsters in the territory?" "Everyone was frightened at first," Elif said, "but since the others explained that the monsters are friendly, most have begun to accept them." "That's good." Lucian breathed a quiet sigh of relief. The influx of new civilians was a blessing, but it also meant their food supply would now be stretched thin. "Is there enough food left in the silo?" Lucian asked. "Your Highness, our current stockpiles might not last long," Elif admitted. However, Lord Gerald also brought back a large quantity of supplies. He unrolled a small parchment and read aloud. "Black bread, white bread, ham, bacon, pickled fish, beef jerky, almonds, figs, wine, beer, mead, oats, cheese, wheat, and spices. These should sustain everyone for now. Moreover, the rye, wheat, and potatoes in the farmland are almost ready for harvest, just one more week." Hearing that, Lucian looked up in surprise. "You managed to gather that much? How did you all survive the winter?" "Several wagons of supplies were lost during the blizzard. After finding the civilians, we searched for the lost caravans and recovered some of them. Later, we traded gold coins with nearby villagers to buy additional food." "Villagers?" Lucian turned toward Ivan. "Thank you for your hard work, Ivan." Ivan rubbed his neck sheepishly. "It was nothing, Your Highness. Just what I should have done." "Do you remember the name of that village?" Lucian asked. Ivan shook his head. "People there just called it the Nameless Village. It's tiny, maybe 20 households. But I did learn one thing from them." He looked up solemnly. "We're near the kingdom's border, deep in the northern region of Unova. Very far from the royal city." Chapter 76, Combi and Vespican. The kingdom's border? The northern region of Unova? Lucian was momentarily taken aback. According to his memory, both Lacunosa town and the Giant Chasm were located in the northeastern part of Unova. Did that mean they weren't actually far from the Giant Chasm right now? "I also heard from the villagers there that every so often, traveling merchants from other regions visit," Ivan added. "They bring foreign goods and local specialties to trade." Lucian nodded thoughtfully. If that was the case, perhaps they could also trade with that village. Those traveling merchants must have seen a great deal of the world, maybe they could even provide information about Lacunosa town. Still, there were more pressing matters at hand. Lucian turned his gaze to Gerald, the man strong enough to defeat an entire Haxorus pack with human strength alone. "Gerald, I have a mission for you," Lucian said. "At your command, Your Highness," Gerald replied. "Go to the mines and protect the miners. They need to dig deeper and extract more ore," Lucian instructed. "Yes, Your Highness." Gerald saluted with a knight's precision. Elif, Lucian turned to his butler, assign work to the new arrivals. Have them help with mining, logging, or gathering berries in the wild. We must accelerate construction. "Yes, Your Highness," the old butler replied quietly. "Teacher, what about us?" Anna asked eagerly, clutching Zorua in her arms. She was certain they'd be given a new task as well. "How's Zorua's combat training going?" Lucian asked. Anna puffed up proudly. "All the gravelers on the mountain? Defeated." While stationed at the mine to protect the workers, Anna had spent her downtime commanding Zorua in mock battles against the wild gravelers living nearby, and together, they'd driven every last one of them out. Lucian blinked. "Impressive. You and Zorua have grown fast." "In that case," he continued, "I do have a new task for you." "Understood. I'll complete it without fail." Anna straightened her back, brimming with determination. "I haven't even told you what it is yet." Lucian said helplessly. He flipped open Christina's Pokémon Habitat Journal and turned to a page marked with 2 drawings of small, bee-like creatures. I need you and Zoroa to make contact with this species. Anna looked down and read aloud the names written beneath the sketches. Combi and Vespiquen? Lucian nodded. That's right. They're hive Pokémon. The Vespiquen serves as the queen, commanding all the Combi in the colony, much like a human monarch and her loyal soldiers. Anna's eyes widened. Teacher, do you mean we're supposed to defeat them? Of course, this must be another trial, she thought, her eyes lighting up. No. Lucian sighed. Not defeat. I want you to befriend them. Build trust. Eh? Anna blinked in surprise. Combi are adept at brewing flower nectar into rich, golden honey. If we can invite them into the territory, we'll be able to produce honey ourselves, Lucian explained patiently. Without a Vespiquen, Combi are small and timid Pokémon, easy prey in the wild. In forests, they're often bullied by greedy Beautifly, who drive them away to steal their nectar. Even Teddiursa and Ursaring frequently raid their hives for honey, while Mothim sneak in at night to steal from the sleeping Combi. When Anna heard this, understanding dawned on her face. Build good relations, invite the Combi and Vespiquen into the territory. Anna clenched her fists in excitement. She could definitely do this. Everyone, I'm counting on you, Lucian said to the group. With their orders issued, Geralt and the others turned to leave, each heading off to carry out their tasks. The vast Lord's Hall soon fell silent. Lucian leaned back in his chair and let out a deep breath. Construction, gathering, logging, mining. Now that the population had grown enough, all these projects could finally progress at once. But that still wasn't enough. In addition to firing bricks, they also needed to make glass. After all, what proper home could be complete without bright, beautiful glass windows? Thinking this, Lucian reopened the territory panel and began scrolling through the list of citizens, hoping to find someone with the right technical skills. That way, he wouldn't have to spend precious satisfaction points to unlock the required technology, a crucial saving during the early stages of settlement. However, while he didn't find any skilled craftsmen, 2 unfamiliar Pokémon names caught his eye. Machoke. Lucian blinked in surprise. Machoke? When did they arrive? He quickly tapped on the names and examined their details. Pokémon, Machoke. Type, fighting. Gender, male. Ability, no guard. Moves, karate chop, leer, low kick, focus energy, sweep, seismic toss. Friendship, 0. Record of life. Year 145 of the royal calendar, Machop was born. Year 146, captured by humans, chained, and forced into hard labor. Year 147, after long periods of backbreaking work, Machop evolved into Machoke. Years of oppression broke its spirit, even after evolving, its life of servitude did not change. Year 148, assigned to accompany the third prince, Lucian, to his new fiefdom. Machoke. Lucian's mind immediately pictured the Pokémon, the muscle Pokémon, strong and solidly built, a symbol of raw strength and endurance. In the modern world, Machoke and its evolution, Machamp, were known as the tireless workers of construction sites and moving companies. Whether carrying heavy furniture, hauling stone, or operating cement carts, they excelled at physical labor. And now, there were 2 of them in his territory. With their help, the construction progress could advance even faster. After all, there was no Pokémon in the entire territory more suited for carrying bricks than Machoke. Still, having endured years of exploitation, Lucian wondered what state they might be in now. After a brief moment of thought, Lucian decided to find them personally and see for himself. Chapter 77, Machoke. At the lumberyard, the workers swung their axes in a steady rhythm, chopping down the surrounding trees. Tall trunks toppled with resounding thuds, sending sawdust and splinters flying through the air. Watching this, the 2 Machoke standing guard finally dared to step forward. They hefted the fallen logs with practiced ease and carried them toward the back, stacking them neatly atop the growing pile of timber. Once the job was done, they turned right back around and started again, carrying, stacking, returning, in an endless loop. Time passed quickly, and soon, the sun reached its peak. The lumberjacks wiped the sweat from their foreheads and began packing up to head home for lunch. But the two Makhok kept working. Though their strength and stamina were immense, the long hours had begun to wear them down. Even so, they didn't dare stop, not even to catch their breath. The eye in the royal city, any pause would have brought the crack of a whip across their backs. Some of the workers nearby noticed and exchanged uneasy looks. One of them finally stepped forward and called out, "Hey, you two! Take a break already." The Makhok had been at it since morning without a single pause. They might look sturdy, but even they had limits. Hearing the man's voice, both Makhok glanced over, but their arms didn't stop moving. To them, these humans were simply fellow laborers. They didn't dare rest until the true master gave the order. Seeing this, the workers grew more confused. And then, suddenly, one of the Mashoki's knees buckled. With a heavy thud, he collapsed to the ground, panting heavily. Even so, the other Makhok kept working. "This isn't right. What should we do?" The workers exchanged panicked glances. "Leave it to me." A calm, steady voice rang out from behind them. Everyone turned and froze. "It's His Highness Lucian. Prince Lucian is here." Lucian nodded to them and said, "You all can rest. I'll handle this." He walked over to the exhausted Makhok, knelt beside him, and carefully examined his condition. Then he lifted his head and looked toward the other Makhok still working. "Stop, Makhok." At the sound of that voice, calm yet commanding, the Pokémon froze. When the Makhok turned and saw the young man's steady gaze, he immediately recognized him. This human was their master. They dared not disobey. The Makhok gently set down the log he was carrying. "Carry him," Lucian ordered softly, "and follow me." The Makhok quickly stepped forward, carefully lifting his fallen companion into his arms. Following behind his new master, he carried the other Pokémon out of the lumberyard and through the quiet settlement, until they arrived at a small wooden house with a courtyard overlooking the riverbank. Lucian knocked on the door. A moment later, it swung open to reveal Lila, who looked surprised to see him. "Your Highness Lucian," she asked. "Help me check on this monster," Lucian said, motioning for the Makhok behind him to bring his companion inside. The obedient Pokémon stepped in and, under Lila's direction, gently placed the injured Makhok onto a soft wooden bed. Lila hurried forward and examined the Pokémon's condition carefully. "What happened to him, Your Highness?" "He's just exhausted," Lucian explained. "They've been working since morning without taking a single break." "What?" Lila's eyes widened in disbelief. "That can't be right." "Oh no." She frowned deeply as she inspected him more closely. "His muscles are severely fatigued, some fibers are even starting to dissolve from overwork. And these scars." She traced one of the faded marks along Mashoki's arm, her voice trembling. "Why are there so many scars on his body?" Lucian sighed quietly. "They must have come from his time in the royal city." Lila's expression darkened. She knew that the royal city often captured monsters and forced them into labor under harsh conditions. She hadn't thought much of it before, but after living here, seeing these Pokémon as individuals, that cruelty now felt unbearable. "How pitiful," she whispered. "Can he be treated?" Lucian asked softly. "I think so. I recently developed a new potion," Lila replied. She turned to her shelf and picked up a small bottle filled with pale green liquid. It was a mixture of standard healing medicine and leaves from a petalil, designed not only to mend wounds and restore strength but also to ease fatigue and replenish stamina. "This monster must have collapsed from accumulated injuries and overwork," she explained, uncorking the vial. "After drinking this, he'll need plenty of rest, but he should recover in time." She carefully fed the potion to the unconscious Makhok. Watching anxiously, the other Makhok let out a low sigh of relief. Moments later, color returned to his companion's face, and the Makhok slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Lucien, and instinctively, terror flashed in his gaze. "Don't be afraid, Mac-Hoke," Lucien said gently, his tone calm and reassuring. "This is no longer the royal city. No one will hurt you here." Choke. The two Pokémon froze, their bodies trembling slightly. Years of oppression had carved fear deep into their bones. Even now, in freedom, they could not bring themselves to believe it. Though they possessed tremendous strength, they had long forgotten how to stand tall. Now, when their new master spoke kind words instead of commands, their first reaction wasn't joy, only confusion. Seeing this, Lucien's heart ached. He reached out, intending to comfort them. But as soon as they saw his hand move, both Mac-Hoke flinched back, their eyes wide with instinctive dread. Yet the pain they feared never came. Instead, they felt a warm, gentle touch upon their heads. The two Pokémon froze completely, startled by the unfamiliar sensation. "Choke." Lucien's voice softened even more. "Don't be afraid. Listen to me carefully." The Mac-Hoke raised their heads, attention fixed on him. "This is my territory," Lucien continued. "Those days are over. No one will hurt you here, and I won't either. Not even if your work isn't finished on time. If you ever feel tired, stop and rest. You won't be punished for it. Everything we're building here, this land, these homes, is for all of us. You're part of that too." The two Mac-Hoke stared at him blankly, as if unable to comprehend what he had just said. Or perhaps, more accurately, they didn't dare to believe it. Chapter 78. Lucien was momentarily unsure how to comfort the Mac-Hoke in this state. Recalling the lives the two had led, he realized that the long years of oppression had scarred them deeply. Their spirits had been crushed, leaving behind bodies that moved only out of habit, like machines still running after the soul inside had already died. Now, if someone suddenly told them that no one would ever harm them again, who would believe it? The two Mac-Hoke stood frozen, blank eyes reflecting the dim light. Lila watched quietly, her expression filled with pity. "Your Highness, were we wrong?" she asked softly. "It isn't about right or wrong," Lucien said hoarsely, shaking his head. What could he even say? It was true that some humans enslaved Pokémon, and also true that some wild Pokémon harmed humans. They were, after all, different beings, two species trying to share one world. Peaceful coexistence was never that simple. Prejudice, fear, conflict, bloodshed, all of it was inevitable. Lucien drew a slow breath. "That's why I have a goal," he murmured. Lila turned to him, startled. "A goal?" "I want to build a place where humans and monsters can live together peacefully," Lucien said quietly. "Your Highness." Lucien's gaze softened as it fell on the two Mac-Hoke. Then, as a thought struck him, his tone turned commanding. "Mac-Hoke," he said firmly. The two Pokémon tensed instantly. "I order you to stop and rest whenever you feel tired. And if anyone dares to mistreat you, you will fight back. Do you understand?" Mac-Hoke. The two nodded quickly, unable to disobey their master's command. "Good. Stay here and rest until you're fully recovered." Lucien turned to Lila. "I'll leave them in your care." "Yes, Your Highness." Lila smiled warmly. "You two can relax here." The Mac-Hoke exchanged a glance, their eyes flicking uncertainly to Lucien. But Lucien had already turned away. "His Highness has other duties," Lila said gently. "From now on, I'll be looking after you. Come, lie down and get some sleep." The two Mac-Hoke hesitated. Everything here felt alien. There was a soft wooden bed, flowers blooming on the table, and shelves lined with herbs that filled the room with a gentle, comforting scent. Their old home had been nothing but a cold, damp stone cell lit by a single torch, sealed by iron bars. They were only taken out when someone needed their strength. Seeing their hesitation, Lila opened the back door. Warm sunlight poured in, spilling over a garden full of blossoms. Several petite green Pokémon basked lazily among the flowers, their leaves swaying gently in the breeze. Lila smiled. "See them? They're called Petalil. They live peacefully here, just like you will. The Mac-Hoke stared at the serene sight in awe. Lila said softly, "You'll live just as freely as they do." At those words, a faint glimmer of hope flickered in the two Mashoki's eyes. Could they really live freely beneath the open sky, like those gentle petals basking among the flowers? The answer to that question came sooner than they could have imagined. After drinking the potion Lila had prepared, their strength returned quickly. By the afternoon, the two Mac-Hoke went out as usual, joining the workers at the sawmill to carry timber. At first, everything seemed the same as before. They worked silently, lifting heavy logs, their movements steady and mechanical. But soon, several of the workers came over, smiling as they approached. "Hey, big guy, come take a break too." One called out cheerfully. "Mac-Hoke." The Pokémon froze, startled. "These jobs won't be done in a day," the man continued, waving them over. "You've got to rest properly if you want to have the strength to work tomorrow." He grinned, handing each of them 2 ripe berries. The two Mac-Hoke stared at the fruit in their palms, their expressions blank with confusion. The man chuckled. "His Highness Lucian told us to look after you. Said you work too hard, that kind of effort isn't good for your health." Mac-Hoke. At the sound of that familiar name, Lucian, both Mac-Hoke froze again. His Highness Lucian, always His Highness Lucian. Before they could react, a few workers gently took them by the arm and led them toward the shade. The Mac-Hoke tensed, instinctively bracing for pain, for the sharp crack of a whip that always came when they stopped working. But the pain never came. The air was still, the laughter of humans echoing softly nearby. Cautiously, the two Mac-Hoke looked around. Could they really rest? Around them, the workers chatted as they ate, talking about the new homes they were building and the kind of lives they hoped to have. The Mac-Hoke sat quietly, listening, still clutching their berries. Finally, one lifted the fruit to its mouth and took a tentative bite. Sweet juice burst across its tongue. The flavor was warm, comforting, and unfamiliar. And suddenly, inexplicably, tears welled up in its eyes. They didn't even know why they were crying. "Hey, big guy, why are you crying?" one of the men asked in surprise. "Are you that tired?" another added, remembering how tirelessly the Mac-Hoke had worked the past 2 days. "Don't push yourself so hard," the first man said kindly. "Even strong ones like you need rest." The two Mac-Hoke listened in silence as more tears slipped down their faces. They had endured endless years of cruelty, and yet, this simple kindness was what finally broke them. No one mocked them for crying. No one yelled or sneered. Instead, someone patted their broad backs and said gently, "It's all right. Rest for a few days if you need to. His Highness Lucian's a good man, he won't be angry, even if you take a break." Though the man spoke lightly, everyone knew the truth, no one here wanted to slack off. Everyone wanted to build their new home as quickly as possible. After resting a while, the two Mac-Hoke stood again. This time, when they returned to their work, they did so not out of fear, but out of gratitude. They worked with steady hearts, no longer slaves bound by chains, but companions striving alongside their new friends. They loved this place. They loved their kind master, His Highness Lucian. Chapter 79, Shipbuilding and Brick Kills. Satisfaction plus 100. Satisfaction plus 100. While Lucian was training Dratini by the riverbank, 2 notifications suddenly blinked across his dashboard. He blinked in surprise. That's from the two Mac-Hoke? The sheer amount startled him. He hadn't expected such a large increase in satisfaction from just 2 individuals. Then it clicked. Given their tragic past, the contrast between their previous suffering and their new life here must have felt overwhelming. That sharp difference alone could easily translate into extraordinary satisfaction. Lucian smiled faintly. "I'll have to thank them later." Their happiness reaffirmed something in his heart, that the path he was walking was the right one. With the 200 points from the Mac-Hoke, plus those earned over the last few days, his total satisfaction points had now reached 362. Which meant, a new technology could be unlocked. Lucian opened the technology panel. His gaze settled on one particular option. Basic shipbuilding. Unlocks foundational shipbuilding methods. Cost, 300 satisfaction points. Perfect timing, Lucian murmured. Ivan had recently discovered a village downstream. With boats, they could not only reach it easily but also transport goods and even expand to the plains across the river. The river beside their territory was wide and deep, far too wide for a bridge with their current materials and manpower. Without professional bridge builders, crossing by ship was the most practical choice. Lucian silently willed the command, "Unlock." A warm pulse of energy filled his mind. Instantly, detailed shipbuilding schematics, material blueprints, and construction methods etched themselves into his memory. Next, I'll need someone skilled enough to lead the shipbuilding, Lucian thought. He decided he'd ask Elif that evening if there were any suitable candidates among the villagers. He turned to Dratny, who was still twirling its tail in the shallow water, forming perfect little ripples. "All right, Dratny, that's enough for today," Lucian said, smiling. "Woo!" They made their way toward the orchard, where Snivy was practicing its energy control, channeling a soft green glow from its palms to nourish the tender fruit trees. Nearby, the small shuckle from the greenhouse peeked curiously, watching Snivy's graceful movements. Now that the territory was safe, even these timid little ones dared to move about more freely. Lucian watched for a while, then called out, "Snivy, how's your control today? Getting more stable?" Snivy raised its chin proudly, its hands still glowing with emerald light. "Snivy," it declared, "of course." Lucian chuckled, glancing up at the amber sky as the sun began to set. "It's getting late. Let's wrap up for today. We'll continue tomorrow." Snivy crossed its little arms, pretending to be aloof, and strutted past him with exaggerated dignity. Lucian sighed softly. Why is my Pokémon too proud to accept affection? Noticing that Lucian hadn't followed, Snivy stopped and glanced back with a faint huff. "Snivy? I'm coming," Lucian said with a helpless smile, following after. That evening, after dinner, Lucian returned to the Lord's Hall as usual. Elif, Geralt, and the others were already waiting for him. When he entered, Elif stepped forward immediately to report. "Your Highness, we've arranged the work for the new recruits," Elif reported respectfully. With their arrival, the progress at the lumberyard and the mines has increased nearly threefold. Lucian nodded, satisfied. Not bad. As expected, population truly is the key to a territory's growth. Elif continued, his tone bright with excitement. Also, with Lord Geralt's protection, our miners were able to dig deeper into the tunnels. Today, along with the clay, they brought back not only iron ore, but also a large amount of coal. Lucian's eyes widened slightly. Coal? Yes. Elif said quickly. Now that we have coal, we won't have to worry about freezing through the winter. Lucian thought for a moment, then nodded. Good. Tell Morik and the others to start building a brick kiln. Up until now, the bricks had been fired one batch at a time by Simzir, an extremely slow process. With a proper kiln, they could place molded clay bricks inside, use coal as fuel, and simply have Arcanus ignite the fire. That would allow them to mass-produce construction materials for the growing town. Yes, Your Highness. Elif replied immediately. Also, Lucian added, see if there are any skilled shipbuilders or bridge workers among our people. We'll need a bridge, or at least a vessel, to reach the plains across the river. I'll ask around, Elif said, making a quick note. One more thing. Lucian's tone softened but remained thoughtful. Try to make contact with the village downstream. If any traveling merchants arrive, inform me right away, I have questions for them. Merchants were often wanderers who'd seen faraway lands and heard countless rumors. Perhaps someone among them had news of Lacunosa town. Lucian's expression grew distant. He still worried about the lack of a truly powerful Pokémon to defend his domain. War could erupt at any time. His elder brothers, protectors of distant realms blessed by Zekrom and Reshiram, had mighty dragons watching over them. But he had none. Kyurem, he thought silently. The empty guardian of ice and shadow. The one left behind. If I can find Kyurem, Lucien murmured, and win its trust. He trailed off, then sighed. Or perhaps Articuno. The icy mountains are said to be its domain. But Articuno was elusive, a fleeting spirit of the north wind. Ever since that fateful winter when it had saved his envoy, Cleveland, the man had returned to those peaks many times hoping for another encounter, all in vain. Understood, Your Highness, Elif said softly. Lucien exhaled. That's all for today. Thank you for your hard work. The men bowed and departed, leaving the hall quiet once more. When Lucien returned home, the first thing he saw was Dratini coiled beside the table leg, rubbing against it. He blinked, then watched in mild shock as the tiny dragon's old skin split and sloughed away, glimmering faintly in the lamplight. Shedding again? Lucien muttered. You're growing faster every day. Dratini blinked up at him, its sapphire eyes wide and innocent. Lucien smiled. Good job. He crouched down and gently patted its smooth head. The dragon chirped softly. Its scales gleamed brighter than before, its vitality stronger. It now stood nearly 0.8 meters tall, already half the average height listed in the Pokédex, 1.8 meters. Given the fact that Dratini grows by shedding its skin, it's likely that when it reaches the height shown in the illustration, the day of evolution will arrive. Chapter 80, Pokeball. The construction of a medieval-style brick kiln was no small undertaking. To avoid disturbing the townsfolk, Lucien had ordered it built on a vacant stretch of land near the outskirts of the territory. Under his direction, the workers began work immediately, using previously fired bricks to form the foundation. The kiln design was simple but effective, much like those Lucien remembered from his old world. It consisted of three main components. The main chamber, a vaulted cavity where the raw bricks were stacked and fired. The ventilation system, a network of air intakes and exhaust ducts that kept the flames burning evenly. The chimney, which drew the heat upward, channeling smoke and hot air through the structure. Ordinarily, such a project would have taken weeks to finish. But with the help of the two Makoke, who carried stones and bricks faster than any team of men could manage, construction wrapped up in just a few days. Once the kiln was ready, workers began stacking shaped clay bricks inside, layering them neatly before pouring in coal for fuel. At the blacksmith Morik's signal, the Simzir took a deep breath, then unleashed a roaring jet of flame into the furnace. The coals caught instantly. A dull red glow spread across the kiln's interior as the temperature soared. Within hours, the pale clay bricks began to harden, glowing faintly like embers in the heat. By dusk, the first batch of fired bricks had been completed, the first true bricks born from their new kiln. The Makoke and human workers worked side by side, hauling the fresh, crimson-hued bricks outside to cool in the open air. Soon after, the builders arrived to collect them, using the new material to pave roads and lay the foundations for homes. Day by day, the territory was transforming. Wooden huts were giving way to sturdy brick houses. Dirt paths turned into smooth, reddish streets that gleamed faintly beneath the sunlight. The changes were still only the beginning. Of course, it would take months, even with Pokémon aid, to complete the town, but progress was undeniable. Lucien sat quietly in the Lord's Hall that evening, eyes half closed in thought as he reviewed the day's reports. The orchard was thriving. The syrup jars were nearly ready for brewing. The miners were producing iron and coal. The farmers tended their fields with the help of Dugtrio, and the builders were shaping a new world from stone and sweat. Everything was proceeding smoothly. The crops will be ready for harvest tomorrow, Lucien murmured. Once they're gathered, we'll finally have stable food reserves. He paused, then frowned slightly. As for livestock, the villagers have started taming wild pheasants for eggs and meat, but pork and beef are still an issue. No pigs, cows, or sheep had been found anywhere in the surrounding wilderness. I'll send someone to the downstream village to purchase young animals, he decided. He hesitated, his expression softening. As for eating Pokémon, he couldn't bring himself to allow it. The thought of consuming the flesh of the very creatures who worked beside them felt deeply wrong, a betrayal of the peaceful coexistence he envisioned.
living with Pokémon and eating them at the same time. That would destroy everything we're trying to build. He resolved, then and there, to pass a law: the consumption of magical beasts' flesh would be forbidden within his territory. Lucian called for relief and quietly gave the order. The old steward, ever dutiful, bowed deeply before hurrying off to carry out the decree. Moments later, Morik, the blacksmith, entered carrying something strange in his hands. "Your Highness Lucian," he said proudly, "I've finished the task you gave me." He held out an object that gleamed faintly in the lamplight. Lucian took it, and blinked in surprise. It was a pokeball, or at least, something that resembled one. Except, this was no modern device. It was a roughly forged, conical shell made from split iron, held together by a metal ring and latch. It looked crude, primitive, even, but undeniably familiar. Could this thing truly capture Pokémon? Lucian turned the crude pokeball over in his hands, feeling its uneven surface and rough edges. The metal was still warm from the forge. Curious, he aimed it at Dratini beside him and pressed the latch. Nothing happened. "Ha!" Dratini tilted its head, blinking its bright blue eyes. It looked at the strange object, then at Lucian, utterly puzzled. Morik scratched his beard, equally confused. "Your Highness, is something supposed to happen?" Lucian frowned slightly, his gaze deep in thought. Perhaps not automatically. Then, an idea struck him. "Dratini," he said gently, "try shrinking yourself. See if you can fit inside." The little dragon blinked. "Dra?" Lucian smiled faintly. "It's all right. Just give it a try." He remembered that the modern Pokeball was developed by a Pokémon professor named Nishinomori, who had studied the mysterious energy that fueled fire-type Pokémon. One day, after an accident in his lab, an exhausted Infernape had weakened and, to Nishinomori's astonishment, had shrunken down and hidden inside the professor's glasses case. That discovery had revealed something fundamental about Pokémon: when they were weakened or felt vulnerable, their bodies instinctively condensed into a compact, energy-efficient form. So perhaps, a Pokeball was, at its core, simply a vessel designed to harness that instinct. Dratini studied Lucian for a moment, then turned to the strange metal sphere. "Draw!" In the next instant, its slender blue body glowed with a soft red light and vanished. It had entered the ball. Morik's jaw dropped. It went inside?" Lucian blinked, momentarily stunned himself, before a smile crept across his lips. "As expected." Moments later, however, the Pokeball clicked, and Dratini emerged again, coiling beside him with a pitiful whimper. Lucian knelt and stroked its smooth head. "Uncomfortable, huh?" Dratini nodded weakly. "Of course." This crude prototype lacked the safety enchantments, cushioning energy, and adaptive interior of a true Pokeball. For Dratini, it must have felt like being trapped inside cold, empty metal. Lucian straightened, thoughtful. He spent the next hour experimenting further. When he finally stopped, several conclusions had become clear. The ancient Pokeball lacked an automatic recoil mechanism, the ability to open or close on command. It had no capture function, it couldn't restrain a resisting Pokémon. A strong one could simply escape. It acted only as a container, relying entirely on a Pokémon's willingness or instinct to shrink and enter it on its own. In short, it was not truly a Pokeball at all. It was merely an imitation, a primitive vessel built upon an incomplete understanding of how Pokémon energy worked. "It seems, there's still something missing," Lucian murmured. Beside him, Morik stared at the crude sphere, his face pale with disbelief. "Your Highness," he stammered, how is that even possible?" That creature's body was several times larger than this cone. "Shouldn't it have shattered?" Lucian smiled faintly. "This is something I once read in an old royal text," he said. "Under certain special conditions, the bodies of magical beasts can alter their state, compressing themselves into energy to protect their essence." He turned the crude ball over in his palm, the firelight glinting across its surface. "If we can refine this properly," Lucian said, "then one day we'll have a way to let monsters travel safely with us." A tool that allows both humans and monsters to move together, side by side. Warwick could only stare, awe softening his voice. To think such a thing is even possible.
That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated to a Medieval Pokémon World.
Thanks so much for listening.
As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well.
See you in the next one.